Welcome to the Women of Ihsan podcast. I'm your host, Sofia, and this is an invitation to join me and our amazing guests to find inspiration and insights into your own journey to Ihsan. If you ever feel overwhelmed or confused along the way, I'm also here to support you so you can tackle your challenges with confidence and make progress towards this lofty goal. To find out more about my work, check the episode description and make sure to subscribe.
والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر.
Bismillah walhamdulillah wassalat wassalam ala rasulillah. Welcome to a new episode of the Women of Ihsan podcast. This week, coming from London, I have Zeba Chowdhury, who is a teacher and educator who started her teaching journey at 21. She is also the co-founder of Empower Your Exam Team, which helps parents support their teenagers through exams. Zeba is interested in personal development, seeking knowledge, and she loves drinking chai. Once again, welcome, Zeba. It's my pleasure to host you today. Thank you so much for making the time.
Walaikum assalam, Sofia. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm very excited to have you today. And we shall start by you telling us about yourself, maybe if you can share about your background or a personal story of yours.
Yep. So my name is Zeba. I am a teacher based in London. I started teaching at the age of 21, taught for 5 years in inner city London schools. Majority serving communities from low income backgrounds. And then I quit teaching for 1 year, went away and did a master's, and came back into teaching. And recently I've launched a community action type project, which is still in its early infancy, called Empower Your Exam Team. So we are aiming to help parents support their children through examinations without the stress and the torture that comes with children going through exams.
Yeah, I can imagine that's a lot of pressure for both parents and the children, subhanallah.
Yeah, it is definitely.
So I can see how it could be very, very helpful, and inshallah, may Allah grant you tawfiq to make this successful project, inshallah. Is there anything else that you could share about your background, maybe what brought you into teaching, or any personal story that you have?
So what brought me into teaching? I have a distinct memory that I associate with teaching from when I was at school. So I went to my local kind of school that was nearby, and I was always a very studious student. I was like a model exemplary student. I worked really hard, got really good grades, and grades really affected my self-esteem. And I'm sure there's lots and lots of people in your audience who probably resonate with that, even though that shouldn't be the case. And I distinctly remember a moment when I was at school, and this is probably why I ended up being a teacher. So my grandfather was a teacher. He was a head teacher of a school in his village where he lived. And so I think teaching has always been something that's been ingrained in me. And I remember sort of when I was in college, like in sixth form college, people used to say that one of the things that they noticed I did a lot of was actually teaching my friends and explaining things to them and making it accessible. So I think I always had the ingredients to be a teacher. And so when I was about 21, I came across this organization called Teach First, which then became the program that I completed in order to start my teaching journey. And the whole premise of the training route that I took was around ending educational disadvantage. So it was about every child, no matter their background, should have the opportunity to have a high quality education. And part of receiving a high quality education is that you need high quality teachers. And so in the UK, one of the biggest problems that we have is that at the moment, the education system is almost like a fourth level emergency service. Schools now are dealing with so many different challenges, and recruitment of teachers and retaining teachers is a big challenge. Most teachers are leaving the profession. People don't really want to join the profession. And so when I went into teaching, it was because I had this real appreciation for what my teachers had done for me. So I went to my local kind of school. It was a mixed school. And the whole idea, they talked about children who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. And disadvantage is a weird term because there's disadvantage everywhere. And it is expressed differently in different contexts. But social or economic disadvantage, as they call it in this context, they said that, if you come from a certain background, your chances of going to a top university was about 11% compared to your peers. At the time that I went to at the time when I was at school, that's what the percentages or the statistics were. And so a lot of organizations and a lot of charities and a lot of businesses have sort of popped up over the last 20 years or so to really change life chances for children. And so helping them kind of access higher opportunities, access higher education, and then go on to develop careers and change their life circumstances. So when I went into teaching, it was around this kind of mission and ethos around, everyone, no matter where they come from, should have the opportunity to get a high quality education. And, as long as you're prepared to work hard, you should have every opportunity and every chance to succeed. And one thing that in hindsight now, looking back, really resonated with me was I remember being at school and sitting in assembly with the rest of my year group, and we had five classes in our year group, and we were all sitting in our classes. And I remember our one of our senior teachers, our head of year, said, the pass rate for the school that we are hoping to achieve is, at the moment it's about 58%. So 58% of children at our school leave with the minimum qualifications that they need at the age of 16. And for your year group, for your cohort, our target is to get 60%. And I remember looking around and I just thought, hold on a minute, there's 5 classes. So you're telling me that out of those 5 classes, 2 classes are essentially just destined to fail, and that's okay. And I just remember thinking, oh God, this is awful. How can so many children already, just the way the system is designed, are just being written off to fail? And, that was in a school that was actually considered an improving school, considered a good school, and it's worse elsewhere. So I remember some schools, it was a 20% pass rate a few years ago. And so, these qualifications, I mean, there's a big debate now around what the value of education is, and how much these qualifications matter, especially when we think about careers now and, people going on to get degrees. Like, is a degree worth the same amount that it was 20, 30, 40 years ago? Perhaps not. But at this time, this was a benchmark or a societal measure in being able to predict someone's life chances, whether that's their in some cases, in some regions, it's used as an estimate for life expectancy even. So I just remember thinking I was quite outraged that just the way the system was designed, that some people are just meant to fail. And so I think that was something that was quite a big turning point for me, and one of the reasons why I became a teacher. And so I literally just graduated university, and I ended up in a job where I was teacher number 8 that a school had because they couldn't retain teachers. And even though I was unqualified, I didn't actually have a teaching qualification at that time. I ended up with this class who had been abandoned multiple times, again and again and again. And so I managed to stay with this class for about 3 months before I started my teacher training. But it just made me realize the value of teachers and how teachers need to be developed, recruited, retained, and what conditions they need in order to be able to do the job that they do, and what impact and influence they have on young people. Because without a doubt, like, I am so passionate about young people and teenagers and what they have. They are the future. And so I really, really believe in teaching, and I think to my core, I am a teacher.
MashaAllah.
Yeah.
MashaAllah, that's amazing. And I mean, anyone who's listening to that, they have been in school, or if there are parents who has children, they're also concerned about the education of the children. And so I think it's really important topic. So subhanAllah, may Allah make it easy. So I guess like everybody else, you've had problems in your life, struggles. Are there any lessons, if you had to pick one lesson that you draw from them and that you could share with us?
I think one thing I have spent a lot of time thinking about a lot recently is around dua, and how we make dua, and the idea of, I think sometimes just the way our societal systems are designed, we have this like checklist of where we think our life is going to go. So you get an education, you might go to university, you'll get a job or start a business or something, and you'll get married, you'll have a house. We have this like checklist and tick list of things that we think we're going to do in a particular timeline, sometimes in a particular order, and things just don't always happen in that sequence, and that's okay. And so everyone's timeline is different. When things are meant to happen to people will happen at different points. And that is part of your rizq. That is what is written for you. And for some people, certain stages come with ease. So, you can think of someone who has managed to get married without making any effort. Like, it just went and landed in their lap, or they managed to get a job because they were simply in the right place at the right time. Or someone who sits exams and they don't even have to go through the hours and hours of effort to try and study and practice. They just look at something once and they know it, and they just manage to do it with so much ease. And whereas other people, they struggle. And I've taught a lot of students who have not just special needs, but all sorts of other needs, like emotional needs, or have had some kind of traumatic history. And for some people, they have got more barriers to overcome to get to the same point as someone else. And so, two people could be in the job and they're doing an identical job, but one person had to have overcome so many more additional hurdles to get to the same point. So often we don't always appreciate just how much someone has gone through to get to the same point as us. And so, treating everyone as an individual and with compassion is so important. And so, like, I've been thinking a lot about dua and the term rizq and what rizq actually means. And often we think that rizq is related to money and is related to our income or our sustenance or our provision. But actually, your provision is in lots of different ways. It's in the company that you have the privilege to grow up with. You've gone into a workplace, and, your colleagues and who they are, and whether you've found mentor figures in your professional life or in your personal life. Like, that is a form of rizq as well. People are a form of rizq. Opportunities that come your way because you are simply in the right place at the right time, that is also part of your rizq. The natural inclinations and the abilities that God has, like Allah has given you, that come to you innately, that is also part of your rizq. And for some people, they have, intelligence is one form of rizq. Your health is another form of your rizq. So that's something that I've been thinking a lot about, how it comes in lots and lots of different forms. And there is some comfort in knowing that you are not going to leave this earth without having received all of your rizq. Whatever Allah has written for you, you will receive it. So we always have anxiety around, all of these things, like, I speak to so many students and they're worried about, oh, how are these exams going to go and where am I going to go and study for university? And then when they're at university, it's like, what job am I going to do? What career path am I going to go down? Then it's what's the next promotion? Then it's, when am I going to get married? All of these things, we have so much anxiety associated with it. And it's because we're trying to kind of make things happen within our control, and actually you're not in control. And so the best thing you can do is accept your limitations and just embrace the knowledge and knowing that all of these things have been taken care of. You do what is within your capacity, and when it is written for you, these things will come your way.
Yeah, subhanallah, yeah, that's so true. Um, absolutely, risk come in a lot of forms, like you said. Subhanallah, it's not only the money that we earn or that we happen to have. It's so many things, like
So
everything
many
that
things.
the sustenance that we have, and like
Mm.
you, one of the things that you said, that it should be, at least it should be comforting to know that we are going to get all of our risk, everything that Allah has written for us, it's going to come to us.
Yeah.
So we should just focus on putting the efforts,
Mm.
and again, not being attached to the outcome and the results, because this is what Allah has written for us, and we are going to get it exactly when He decreed that we are going to get it. But in the meantime, we make dua always, and we put in the efforts so that we deserve what's coming our way. It's not just, okay, I'm sitting here and waiting for life to happen to me.
No.
SubhanAllah. SubhanAllah,
And
that's
and
amazing.
and sometimes we have this perception, and again, this is our limitation and our fault. We have this perception that things are delayed because they
Yeah,
haven't happened according to our expectation, that there is a delay. But actually, it's not a delay, it's in perfect timing. It's just our perception is that it's delay. And there's wisdom in that delay or in that waiting period. You might be making dua for something and you've been making dua for it for a long time and it
yeah,
hasn't happened yet. you know, what, like, are you meant to just stop making dua for it? Are you meant to stop asking for it? Or do you accept that in that you going through that process of continuing to make dua, there is a transformation that you are undertaking as well? And so part of it is that I feel like, it's almost like you are being refined, and what you are being refined and you are being prepared for that moment when that thing will happen for you. Um, and so, yeah, in the interim, things are happening elsewhere that you have no knowledge of. Um, I remember going to a talk once by a revert, and he was saying it's like we're in a massive play, and with puppets, and everything is being orchestrated, and things will be in the right position at the right time for things to come together. And so we don't have knowledge of like we don't see what's hidden. We only see what is apparent to us. And so having that comfort that, I don't need to feel anxious about the future. And I also don't need to have regret about the past. Like I can be content, like I can appreciate the things that have happened to me, and how those things have made me or led me to where I am. And I can take comfort in knowing that Allah has got the future covered. And I just have to work on where I am right now and do what is within my capacity, because at the end of the day, I will be judged according to my capacity, and not everyone's capacity is different. Some of us have capacity to do more, some of us have capacity to do less. And so it's really important to also be kind to yourself and not compare, and just
exactly. Yeah,
be a lot more accepting of where you are right now in the present.
yeah, yeah, exactly. We tend to either dwell on the past or be anxious about the future,
Mhm.
when all we can do is being in the present moment and take care of his present moment, because at the end of the day, that's all we have, and it's a very, like, these are all fleeting moments,
Mhm.
that and this is just our life going through all of these moments, subhanallah. So I think that's really interesting, and something that a lot of us, we do kind of, again, we dwell in the past, we are anxious about the future. And that's interesting that you say that you've been thinking a lot about dua and rizq in, like, recently. So I'm curious about, in the past, I know, like, you like you are very interested in personal development, and we can hear that you have been thinking a lot about all of these things. But did you were you made aware at some point that you had some misconception or limiting belief that were holding you back? And so how did you what made you aware of them, and how did you overcome these beliefs?
I have had so many misconceptions and so many limiting beliefs. And I think every time you are confronted with something new, or where you are outside of your comfort zone, or you're really struggling with something that is difficult, a person that is challenging, you really have to evaluate your own narrative. So, often we tell ourselves things and reasons for like why we can't do things. So, for example, this initiative that I've co-founded with my friend, we have had so many misconceptions and self-limiting beliefs around, oh, but we're teachers, like how can we do something outside of a school? How do we go about advising parents? That's not in our remit. We come up with so many reasons as to why we can't do something, but actually you don't have to be, perfect. It's in you go and seek those answers. So where you feel like you are lacking, you go and learn about it. And chances are there is someone who's a few steps ahead of you that you can learn from. So in terms of limiting beliefs, it's to do with the stories you tell yourself. So we constantly tell ourselves stories. So I see this a lot with teenagers. They say things like, well, I'm not good at this, or you know, it can be as simple as like my parents prefer this sibling over me, or misconceptions that they might have around this is too hard, I will never succeed, or I'm not naturally inclined this way. This is not something that comes to me innately. And so part of it is about making the effort to learn, to practice, finding people who can help and guide you, so teachers, mentor figures, doing a lot of introspection and reflection on yourself, and thinking about where some of these ideas originate from. So we don't realize that so much of our childhood and our families and experiences at school shape so much of our adult life. And if you can think back and trace where some of those early experiences come from and how they have shaped and formed your personality. So, for example, for me, I knew that I had this real I had this real fear of failure, is one of the things that I think I really struggled with. So the idea was failure to me was very black and white. Making a mistake was not something that I wanted to do. I would often avoid starting something because it had to be done correctly and it had to be done perfectly. And some of that came down to what I thought about myself, and how I valued myself. And so trying to dissemble that, and break those things down will help you move forward and overcome those self-limiting beliefs. Yeah, I'm trying to think of an example, but I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Yeah, but I think that's like how you described it is I think we can resonate with a lot of that. Comes from so many things, starting with our childhood, how we were raised, the things that we were hearing,
Yeah.
whether true or false, but we just absorbed everything. And it's how our personalities have been shaped at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the day. And for some people, like some of the things were not true at all,
Mm-hmm.
but it became
It
like you said,
became true
something.
to them because they kept
Yeah,
telling
but
themselves this.
exactly, but it's just
Yeah.
in our head. And
Mm-hmm.
until you realize, okay, but actually it has nothing to do with reality. It's just
Mm-hmm.
something that I keep telling myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and again, we can only identify this kind of limiting beliefs by pausing, taking the time of reflecting from our past. Sometimes we need some help in that. Just someone who's holding the mirror, and someone who's going to question you. Okay, so you think you can't do that, but have you ever tried? Like, is it something which has been proven in reality, or is it just something that you keep telling yourself in your mind? Subhanallah.
And so, yeah, so I think when we have these beliefs, we actually need to rationalize it. So you need to take a step back and you need to ask yourself, do you have evidence to support this belief that you have? And it could be, and it's not just about things that we believe about ourselves, it could also be beliefs that we have about other people.
Yes.
And it can be as simple as this person doesn't like me, or they think badly of me, or we tell ourselves these things all the time and we don't realize it. Or I'm not good enough, just taking a step back and asking yourself, where do these things actually come from, and are they rational, or are they just things that we tell ourselves that we have conditioned and reinforced over the years, and so now they're ingrained in us. And so part of it is about trying to unlearn those things and putting yourselves in environments where you're having to go outside of your comfort zone in whatever capacity that you can. A friend of mine has recently left teaching, and I was having a conversation with her, and she was saying how she's trying to get in touch with her extroverted side because she's so introverted. And so she's on purpose putting herself in situations where she has to talk to people that she's not used to talking to. So doing small things where you take yourself out of your comfort zone, and then you realize over time that actually you've come so far and made so much progress that a past version of you would actually be quite proud of where you are today. And when you are making dua for something, and it could be like, I really want a child, or I really want to get married, or I want to go to this job, I want this particular job, or you are making dua and you are constantly making dua for something. We often have self-limiting beliefs also about Allah, and we don't realize it. So sometimes we say, oh, maybe Allah has not written this thing for me. Maybe it's just written that I'm gonna get this in the hereafter, like this thing isn't for me. So sometimes we place limits on Allah. And my cousin, because I was talking to my cousin about dua, and she said something to me which I thought was really nice. And she was like, Jabba, when I make dua, I am delusional. She literally said, I am delusional. Like, I ask for the most biggest things, the most outrageous things sometimes. And it's about she constantly makes dua all of the time, my cousin, and she's always asking me to make dua for her. And it's one thing that I really admire about her, is because every time I talk to her, she's always talking about dua.
MashaAllah.
And so she says, I'm delusional in my duas. And that's not to say, you know, ask for things that are ridiculous, but you should be aspirational. You should ask in an aspirational way, because I remember Sheikh Mohammed Al Sharif saying, who stands in front of a king and asks for pennies? Like, you
Yes.
should ask, and you should ask like greatly and abundantly. You shouldn't be vague. You shouldn't ask for a lesser version of what you want. You should ask because you are asking in front of the one that has the capacity to grant everything that you are desiring. So you should ask abundantly, and definitely is something that we can all kind of work on, and I'm still
Yeah,
working on.
definitely, yeah. It's true. It's true. We tend to think, oh, but because, like, subhanallah, it comes at the end of the day, I think it really comes from wrong knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
And I think it's the one thing we first need to fix, not putting limits to what Allah can or cannot do, or what He can grant us or not, and do we deserve this or not. We should be making dua, and then whether it comes or not, in which form it comes or not, it's not up to us. and think that whatever we are asking for, it's not because millions of people are in need and they're also asking for something less, that my dua now doesn't have priority somehow. Like sometimes we would think, oh, actually, so people are in need, subhanallah. So who am I to ask for something more, like something on top of everything that I already have? And it's like Allah doesn't work like that.
Mm.
And this is putting like limits to what He has in store for us. And I think, like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told us that dua is the core, the essence of the worship. It's mukh al-ibadah. So it is actually very, very important that we do that, because when we do that, we are actually recognizing, acknowledging the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Mm.
And everything happens by His will, and everything is in His control. And we should be asking for small things and really big things.
Mm. And we should
Whether
be treating Allah like our confidant, as
Yeah.
you go about your day.
So like what your cousin is doing is actually what all of us should do,
Mm.
like making constant dua, being constantly in conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because at the end of the day, like if we are really thinking about it, we take for granted so much, even the air that we are breathing in, the capacity to taking this air and having our lungs function properly, our heart beating so perfectly. And we think, okay, it's normal. It's not. And actually, it's not. And we take this for granted. And when we pause, and so being grateful is so important as well.
Mhm.
Being grateful, if you're like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in the Quran, and if you are grateful, I'm going to increase you.
Mm.
So being grateful for what we have so that we can get even more always. And it's not up to us to say, oh yeah, but now that's enough, because so many people, they need actually, like everybody has their rizq. And what Allah gives, it's unlimited. You're not taking somebody else's rizq. You're not
No.
taking somebody else's share in the kingdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is one misconception that we could have about our faith, is that we can't ask for anything, or no, now it's
Because
just too
asking for
much.
more, it's almost like asking for more is an expression of being ungrateful,
Yeah.
but it's not. And the other thing that I've been
On
thinking
the
about
contrary, it's
recently,
because
yeah.
it is because you are grateful for Allah, and you know how generous
Mm.
He is, and He actually has the power to give you anything that you ask for.
Mm. And I think one other thing I've been thinking a lot about is appreciating how many things that you have in your life right now that are a consequence of other people's du'as. So, yesterday I went to an event and I needed to pray. It was Salah time. And I was in this like office co-working space, and they had a designated prayer room. And I was like, great, like this is so good. This office has a designated prayer room for their Muslim staff. That's really, really good. And so they had this like tiny room, and I went inside, and there was a cupboard. So I thought, okay, the prayer mats must be kept in the cupboard. And I opened the cupboard, and I was so shocked to see. I don't know if this happens in other places. This is just my experience because I've never seen this before. But inside the cupboard, there was like a little basin for someone to do wudu. So you don't
Mm.
even have to go to the bathroom to do it. They had
Mm.
accommodated this here. And I just remember thinking, this is amazing because, in the UK, 40, 50, 60 years ago, when like some of the Muslim community was much, much smaller, the idea of like having the facilities to be able to pray was completely unheard of. There was a generation before that would have lost their jobs because they had gone to Eid Salah instead of coming to work. and it just makes you appreciate like how far things have come. So things that we have now, we literally take for granted because we have no idea that, someone before us has
And even now,
advocated for even,
it's just
yeah.
even now, but in other places, like in other countries,
Mhm.
other places, it's still the case, unfortunately.
It is definitely, yeah. In other
Yeah,
places, I know it's really, really difficult, but alhamdulillah, in London, I'm just talking about what
yeah,
I've
yeah,
what
yeah.
I've experienced in London. We are very, very privileged, and um, the amount of ease that we're able to do certain things now is um is amazing. It's incredible. It's completely unheard of, and I often tell my students how privileged they are and how fortunate they are and how lucky they are that they are able to express their faith in the way that they are able
Yeah,
to, and that they're in an environment where it's welcomed and appreciated, because not everyone has that.
indeed.
And again, that's another blessing. And, just so many things in our lives that we don't realize that are a consequence of someone else's efforts and someone else's,
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
so yeah.
yeah, mashallah. It's amazing how we can benefit from other people's dua, subhanallah. And this is how far the generosity of Allah goes. Like it goes through generations.
Mm,
Doesn't even stop there.
mm,
SubhanAllah. Now I want to talk about, like for every other episode of the podcast, how your
mm.
faith helps you overcome those challenges in your life and how it has shaped your perspective on life.
I think it's been really important and central. I think you stop seeing like nothing is accidental. Everything has purpose and meaning behind it. Nothing is a coincidence, is how I see things. And in every moment, no matter what the difficulty is, with that difficulty, there is always an opportunity to. And so part of it is about recognizing what opportunities are there here for me. And opportunities mean like what opportunity do I have to do good here? What opportunity do I have to do something that Allah would be pleased with? And that can be, as simple or basic as someone being rude and not responding with anger. It can be as simple as mostly it's about response, how we respond to things, and trying to be more proactive about it rather than reactive. In times of difficulty, in particular, uh, is probably when you should be, you know, leaning into your faith even more. I can think of so many difficult times where I don't think I would have gotten through that difficulty if it wasn't for my faith, without doubt. And I think part of the reason why I've stayed in this profession for so long is also because of my faith, because I see it as an opportunity to do something that I hope will benefit me in the next life too. Um, and I really think about how I can demonstrate ihsan in my work as well. So my students will often say that I'm like a really geeky, nerdy teacher. And one of the things they teach you when you're training to be a teacher is around the idea of having high expectations, that, a good teacher inspires, motivates, and challenges their students and has really high expectations of them. Um, and to me, that's no different to trying to have ihsan in your teaching practice, or how you teach. And it's not just the fact that like these are secular exams that I'm preparing students for. I'm also trying to help them become good human beings, that will go on to be good adults, and then people who will be a valuable contribution towards society and the ummah. So that's another thing to think about. So it's so important, and it's important in every facet. It's important in your conduct with other people. People are so important. Um, and so yeah, just because you don't realize like the smallest interactions, you don't know what's happening in someone else's life. I remember a colleague who was really struggling with their mental health, and they just said the fact that I had said good morning to them that made their day. And I don't even remember saying good morning to them,
SubhanAllah.
but
Yeah.
but I don't actually have the recollection of saying that. But something as small as that
Mm.
really helped them in that moment, saying good morning, how are you? Um, so yeah, so I think it's really important.
Definitely having a good character and being mindful of how we present ourselves to the world, the people around us, especially the people who see us every day, like our family, but also like if you are in a workplace, your colleagues, or in your case, your students, really showing your good sides, but being intentional about that, in the sense that you're not doing that so that they have a good opinion of you, but rather that Allah is pleased with you.
Mm.
And so I think that's definitely what Ihsan is also about. So you told us about Ihsan as a teacher. What does it mean for you to strive and become this woman of Ihsan in in general, not only as a teacher, but also in your everyday life?
It's about having like a real mindfulness of Allah at all times. And I think the tendency would be for a lot of women to describe it in terms of the roles that they have. And I agree that in those roles we should be demonstrating them, but I think we're also more than just the roles that we have. I think often women
Exactly.
just I don't know if reduce is too strong of a word, but we do sometimes reduce ourselves to the roles that we play in our lives. So,
Yeah, that's
um,
true. And that's why I asked again, because you described quite well how you go about trying to show ihsan in your profession.
mm,
But I also want to go, a bit deeper, and so that the people who are listening to that can also ponder and reflect, okay, if I'm not wearing my hat as a mother, as a daughter, as any profession that you might be having, or as a student, and it's just me now without all of these labels,
mhm.
what remains? Who am I? And you know if I were just alone without all of these roles, what is what is left of me to strive for ihsan?
They say ihsan is worshipping Allah as almost as though you see him, but also recognizing worship takes multiple forms. So it's not just the formal, the ritualistic side of worship, like reading the Quran and, Salah and stuff like that, but it's also worship comes in many forms. So when you take those roles and things and you strip them away, who you are is it's bare. Like there's no you are what you are. And again, the idea of like doing what is in your capacity and being kind to yourself as well, because often we are really horrible to ourselves, and very unkind to ourselves. So having compassion for who you are, what your experiences are, um, understanding your limitations, understanding your advantages and your disadvantages, because we all have things naturally that have been gifted to us, that someone else perhaps doesn't have. And there are also things that hardships that we have encountered that have maybe made certain things more difficult for us or have acted as a barrier. Ihsan is, to me, doing meeting your doing what is within your capacity to the best of your ability and reaching your potential. I think potential is a really important thing to understand. And so we're not all judged by the same standard.
Exactly, yeah.
It's funny because in examinations you are, everyone is judged by the same standard, but actually
Yeah.
we're not. And ultimately understanding that your benchmark or your standards will be different, and likewise it will be different for someone else. We are not all granted the same capacity. That's not to say that we should have a very fixed mindset and say, well, I've done what I can and that's it. No, we also need to have a growth mindset as well, because we have that your capacity also includes your potential.
Yeah.
Um, And so that term capacity is not a limiting term. In fact, it's about being, to me, it is, in a way, it's like ihsan, it's about excellence. It's being at the best of your potential, like your complete reach, that is your capacity. So it's not a ceiling, it's more reaching what Allah has given you the gifts to be able to receive, to reach. And so it's different and it's unique for everyone. It's context dependent. It's, like we said, that rizq is different, comes in multiple different forms. So again, it's the difference between, to me, it's like the difference between good and great.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be great, not just good, you want to be great.
Yeah, that's true. And I see things like potential is, it's not something that, like, we all know that I have a certain potential, but how do I know what it is? It's by going after it.
Mm,
It's actually in the action. SubhanAllah. The thing is, Allah, He doesn't judge us by the results, the outcome.
mm,
Because, for instance, let's say I have a project in mind and
mm,
I make the intention. The
mm,
intention is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then I put in the efforts, the actions to make this project a reality. If I'm not able to pursue this endeavor until the end, until I actually see it actualize, because of, I don't know, it could be so many reasons. First of all, I could die,
mm,
or I have a really serious sickness that now I can't do it anymore, or something happens in the world that makes everything stops.
mm,
So however, and then I don't have to be discouraged and say, oh, no, this will never become a reality. Actually, no, because of my intention,
mm,
and because on a daily basis, I am putting in the efforts to go towards it, so that Allah knows if the conditions have had been there, like He would have given me enough to live, or He had given me the health that I was missing, or He would have prevented this event that made this project just fall apart. He knows that this project would have resulted. So we have to keep in mind not to focus on the outcome and the
mm,
results. This is all with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He doesn't judge us with the results, like you said, the educational system. They just look at, okay, in the end, what's your grade? Did you pass
mm,
or not? They don't look at, okay, this student actually spent so many hours, they read so many books, they deprived themselves from sleep, they deprived themselves from distractions. And this other student who just has it like he's more inclined to learning, it was very easy for them.
mm,
And so they got this grade. No, actually the one who had made all of these efforts, he's going to get more reward maybe
mm,
than the one who it just came easy to him.
mm,
SubhanAllah. And this is where Allah is the most just. On top of being the most generous, he's also
mm.
just, because He looks at our states at all times. And yeah, He has given us a potential, but we don't know actually what it is. Like, we don't know how much it is
No, we
until
don't. That's not something we know.
until we go after it. And so
Yeah.
He doesn't, he's more Ihsan is more about, okay, are you now aware that you have this potential that you could try to achieve? You could
Yeah.
you could you could go after it, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
But I think this is, yeah, in a nutshell, that's what you said about that.
And there's a level of kindness that you have to also be aware of, because in different seasons of life, you have
Exactly. Yeah.
your your capacity is different. You know,
Yeah.
there are going to be some places, some points where you've got more free time, some places, sometimes where you've got less free time, and so you're working in a different manner. You know, sometimes there are other priorities that take up more of your time, and so you're working on other aspects of you. You know, potential is not, I think sometimes we define it in terms of like career, but your potential
Performance as well.
or perform or yeah,
Yeah.
and performance, but there's also potential in our relationships, in our family dynamics, in even in our relationship with Allah. So thinking about, it's not just limited to
Yeah.
things that society conditions us to be associating with those terms.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, yeah, that's true. And
yeah.
that's the thing that it's a theme that keeps coming up also in the podcast that we've been like previously we talked about that with other guests, that you don't compare yourself to anybody.
No.
It's what you yourself, you know what you can do. And again, like you said, there are seasons of life where you are going to be able to do more and where you're just going to be able to do less, but less in those times is going to be fine
Hmm.
because again, you had the intention and you met
And
the
that's your best in that moment,
exactly,
in that present,
exactly.
that's your best, and that's
Yeah,
okay.
exactly, exactly. And only Allah knows that.
Yeah.
So again, just trying to be mindful of this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, being kind to ourselves, because He's not expecting anything from us that He knows we are not able to do right now. So subhanAllah, I just think like s- this topic is so vast, and every time we can have these discussions, like with every guest, we are going to talk about it, and I'm going to have a different answer. And this is to show that there is no, like, you, if you're listening to this and you are trying to, this is not about, okay, now I want to do like so and so. No, it's just about you looking at your own potential and capacities
Mm.
in a given on a given day, on a given, period of your life. Like if you are a student, what is in your capacity? You are single, what is in your capacity? Because okay, now you get married, or I don't know, you have to care for maybe one of your parents or whatever it may be, or you start a new job, new new challenges, and every time you have to stay flexible and adapt. And this is also very important. Like, don't look at, oh yeah, when I was a student, when I was 20 something, and I could just have sleepless nights and pray all night, and you know, it's not going to be like that all the time. And I think one of the things I've said in the past is also, when you are young and full of energy, you should try to really make the most of it, because it might not be the case all the time.
Mm.
And intentionally delaying things that you know you can do them now, just because, "Oh, okay, I'm going to do that later." This is not the wisest thing to do. Like if you know you can do something now, do not delay it,
Mm.
because later you don't know if you're going to be healthy for, you don't know. Are you going to be healthy? Are you going to have the time for that? So it's more about, again, you are the only one who can judge yourself, and having this honest conversation with yourself. I also like to ask about, the routines that you have. It doesn't have to be, again, it doesn't have to be something very elaborated and sophisticated, but just, the things that you do on a regular basis and that you know that it's helping you being on top of your game.
I think two things that come to mind. I'm not going to say wake up at 4 a.m. every morning and, things like that. Or, I mean, we all know things like that work, but I think two things that have really made a difference to me. is number one, journaling. Has made a massive difference to me, and I think I've been journaling for about 5 years now. And I've got my old journals, and I cannot believe it's almost like a documentation of where the state of my mind was back then, seeing how much progress I've made, and it's a really powerful thing to do, just to write. And you could develop a daily habit. I used to have one, but now it's just intermittent. Like when I feel like doing it, I do it. But that's been really important to me. And then the other thing is around walking outdoors, like being in green spaces, being in natural environments and in around nature is really helpful to your mental well-being. Gives you some space, because it just not just like being surrounded by Allah's creation, but just we don't realize how much our physical environment affects us. And it's not just the people around us, it's like the interior, the physical confines of the space that we're in. And as someone who's introverted, like I always had this thing, I'd rather be indoors than outdoors, but actually the value of being outside in green spaces or like in natural spaces makes such a big difference, such a big difference. And it gives you that space to just be able to reflect as well. So those two things have been really helpful to me in terms of like habits or things that I have found to be really helpful.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like the last thing that you said, being an introvert, like I'm also one. So having this tendency of, okay, I'm just going to stay home and being comfy,
Yeah.
but actually being outside in nature is quite compatible with being an introvert.
No, yeah, it definitely is. Definitely is. I think it's just not your inclination. Even meeting new people,
Yeah,
because sometimes when you're on, you know, all of this stuff that we've been doing with our project, we've been constantly filled with like often self-doubt and often, how is this going to work out? And is this going to really work? And will people accept this? And what's the next step? And I can't see the next sort of 5 steps along this journey. And the thing is, you don't need to. You don't need to. I think that's another form of anxiety that we have to be able to see the path really clearly. You're trying to get to the top of the mountain, but you have to be able to see and visualize the entire route. You don't. You just need to be able to see the first step, and you take that first step, and then the next step will reveal itself, and you
exactly.
just go step by step by step. And there's been so many moments when we've been on this journey, my friend and I, that we've gone somewhere and we've met someone, and that person has given us an idea or a suggestion or directed us or signposted us to something else, and then that led us to, it's almost like we're on this quest.
Yeah,
um, and Allah has put certain people in our path who have come along the way to um, give us a suggestion or an idea or direct us towards something. And then that has then uh, given us some momentum, especially when we were lacking momentum, or given us some clarity when we were struggling or feeling confused. So you don't realize where guidance or inspiration can come from, especially in the form of people. And
mm,
you don't have to have it all figured out. Part of it is just going on the journey, and I'm taking this first step and having the faith that, the next step will reveal itself.
yeah,
Uh, and just keeping on going, even when it feels really uncertain, even when you have no idea where something is taking you or where it's heading, just keep having that faith and just having that reliance and just keep going, is really helpful.
yeah. I feel like you have answered my next question, but
Oh, have I?
but it doesn't matter. I'm going to ask it anyway. I mean, it's so important what you've just said. It's so relevant, uh, especially anytime we start a business or any kind of project that we start and we are not sure. Oh, but I still need this and that. We want everything to be perfect, and then and then get started. But the thing is, it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to feel like, oh, now is the right moment. I have absolutely everything that I need. No, you need, like you said, you need to take the first step. And when you are there, you will actually learn more about how does the next step looks like. And
There's a
you will
really,
get the resources, the tools, or
yeah,
whatever to figure out, okay, now this is my next step.
there's a really nice quote from a book by Dr. Julie Smith, and she says, confidence grows by going where you have none. And so you don't get more confident or better at doing something by staying where you are. So if you have an idea or something that you say to yourself, oh, one day I would like to do this, or this would be an interesting thing to do, but now's not the right time. Finding a way to test it or experiment with it, or just generating something and putting it out there so that you can get a response and some feedback, because whatever you do will always be imperfect. And part of it is about getting that feedback and refining it and doing it again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
And
so
if
in order to
yeah.
gain confidence, you have to go where you have done. You have to do the thing that you don't want to do. And you have to get yourself outside of your comfort zone. And it doesn't always mean taking a big radical step. It doesn't mean quitting your job and, going all in 100% into this. It could be really, really simple. It could be, I'm going to put aside 1 hour in my week to actually try and work on this and develop this idea. It could be, I'm going to, you know, get in touch with this person, like thinking about small steps that you could do so that an idea doesn't sit in our head. Because so many of us have such great ideas, but they never get realized because they just sit in our heads and we just say, one day,
Yeah.
if dot, 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 or one day when I have more time, more capacity, when, one day I will, but actually you need to make that one day today.
Yeah.
And not just sit with an idea, and not be limited by things. One of the things I said to myself a lot was, you're just a teacher. You can't do this, you can't do that. But actually, there are plenty of teachers who have gone and done the thing that I'm trying to do, and if not more. So we don't need to give ourselves, like, again, this is a narrative you tell ourselves, you tell yourself this story. It's not necessarily backed up by evidence. There's no rational reason behind it. It's just something you have told yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, but again, and that's something we've been talking about in previous episodes. Where we often start wrong is by looking for perfection,
Mm.
and that's the recipe for disaster, because it's never going to happen. We shouldn't look for perfection. There's no such thing as perfection. Perfection is only with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So instead of looking for, oh, everything has to be perfect. No, look for doing the best that you can. In that given moment, strive for excellence. Strive for ihsan. And there's a big difference between, again, excellence and perfection.
They're not the same thing. Sometimes we
They're
think they
not.
are. They're not.
It's not. It's not. And that's why a lot of times we don't do things because, oh no, I still need this, I still need that. Again, you want everything to be perfect. But what's the definition of these things being perfect? Like, we often, like, first thing that I hear, like first idea on top of mind is, I want the perfect wedding. Oh yeah, so you are going to put up everything, set up everything to have your perfect wedding, but then you will have all of these guests who will have so many things to criticize in your perfect wedding. I mean, it's just a bit of a silly example, but isn't it true
But
that
also in that example, the person assumes that they're in control and they're not. They're not. They're
Exactly.
not in
Yeah.
control
On top
because
of
as
that,
much
yeah.
as they try to control things and plan it
Mm.
and execute it in according to how
Yeah.
they did it,
Yeah,
then
that's true. That's true. Yeah.
it's just not, things are just not in your control. And I think
Yeah.
talking about perfectionism as someone who I'd probably describe myself as a reforming perfectionist. Um, I think one thing that I say to myself more often is, this is good enough. So I used to really struggle with my workload, especially when I was a beginner teacher, because I wanted to always plan these amazing lessons. And I'd spent like hours planning one lesson, and then the children would arrive and it had been raining or there had been a fight, and my lesson would completely go out of the window, despite the efforts that I had put in to make it as good as possible. And so, and then there were other times where I've spent 15, 20 minutes planning a lesson and the delivery was great. Like I couldn't fault it. And so often what I just say to myself is, this is good enough. This is good
Mm.
enough. I don't
Mm.
need, um, this is good enough. Like this is, and when I say good enough, it's not to say that we shouldn't be um striving for like amazing things. We should be, but again, understanding like capacity moment by moment, what can you do in your current circumstances? Doing what you can, doing your best, this is good enough. And this is good enough. In this instant, this is good enough. On a different day where I have more capacity or I have the, circumstances are different, good enough will look different then. So
Exactly.
so saying that to myself has really helped. This is good enough in this circumstance, in this situation, in this moment, this is good enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is basically putting yourself a limit,
Mm,
because otherwise you're just feeling frustrated, unsatisfied all the time, thinking that, like, not thinking good of yourself, but you can't be good enough
mm.
when actually it is. So again, things that you've touched upon a couple of times, having this compassion with ourselves, being kind to ourselves, recognizing all the efforts that we're already putting in.
And
And
it's really hard. It is really hard because we sometimes think, oh, what I say to myself doesn't really matter. But actually, what you say to yourself is is going to be a precursor to the relationships that you form, especially new relationships, because often you're setting your own boundaries as well, and you're treat almost teaching somebody new how to treat you. And the other thing that we don't realize is with children, children absorb so much of what we do. And so when we are not kind to ourselves or not compassionate to ourselves, we're modeling that to them. And so there is a responsibility there, that you being compassionate to yourself, um, as somebody who, for example, is a mother, you are also teaching your son or daughter to have compassion for themselves, and that's really important. Like I can't explain how hard it is to be a parent in today's day and age. It's really, really difficult, and it is also very difficult being a child or a teenager or a young person in today's society as well. There's just so many barriers, so many things demanding your attention, so many things that can lead you astray. And parents have so many demands on their time, and despite having good intentions, so much of it is outside of their control. And so having that compassion for yourself is so important. Otherwise, you'll just end up burning out and you'll end up making yourself ill. And, it's that whole thing about looking after yourself first and making sure that you are, um, you can't pour from an empty cup. So you can't do anything for other people unless you yourself are um, nourished and sustained and you are looking after yourself. And that's different for everyone. And so again, recognizing that, how you talk to yourself and having that compassion is also modeling for other people, um, especially children, is so important.
yeah, indeed. Yeah, amazing. So you've given like, again, you've been replying to that question that I haven't asked it yet, but I'm
Oh.
going to ask it anyway, because you might have something else amazing for us in store. So what message or piece of advice you would like to give to maybe the audience and maybe more specifically younger sisters?
If I could say something to my younger self or to a lot of the young girls that I teach or even my younger sisters, is to be brave. I think sometimes bravery is not a word that we associate with women. Often it's not. Like words like courage and bravery is not words that we typically associate with them. We associate words like kind and compassionate and, nurturing and things like that. But actually, I think the word brave has been something that it was like my word for last year. Like every month I was in my journal, I would write down one thing that I did that was considered brave because I wanted to be less timid or be less scared or fearful, mostly about fear of failure, and just do something that is brave. So I was tracking one action that I would do every month that was brave. So my advice to my younger self or to young sisters in the audience is to be brave. And again, bravery will look different to different people in different contexts. So try and be brave, try and be courageous, try and take that risk, take that gamble, do that thing which takes you outside of your comfort zone because you don't know, like you don't, it's about what you were saying about chasing your potential or trying to reach your potential. You'll only get that if you are brave and you accept that actually where I am, there is capacity or potential to do more and being brave and facing that uncertainty. And we often say no to ourselves or we choose not to be brave or choose not to be courageous because we're scared of the uncertainty that's in front of us. So it's like, well, if I go for this, what if I get rejected? Or if I say this or like advocate for myself or, stand up for myself, like what's the backlash going to be? And so being brave, and I don't mean reckless, I mean being brave. The two things are not the same. Being brave in situations and just taking yourself a little bit outside your comfort zone, and doing that over a longer period of time, you'll be amazed like how far you can come. So yeah, I think that's my message about being brave.
Amazing. I love that. I haven't had this yet, so great. Again, I love doing these interviews because every time, same question, different answer.
Yeah, I work with so many teenage girls, and I think sometimes I just want to shake them and I'm like, I know you can do this. I know you think this. Why are you not expressing it? Why haven't you put yourself forward for this? You can do this. This would be such a great opportunity for you. And it comes down to sometimes it comes down to not being brave enough. But that word brave, I like it because it's not a word that we typically associate with yeah, it's not a word that we associate with them.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And by hearing you, I can't help by thinking that as much as you are helping and supporting your students, they also have an influence on you.
Of course, 100%. They say this about teaching, that you think you're changing them, they're changing you. 100%, they are
Like
changing
having
you,
children, like having children. It's also completely, yeah, changing you, challenging you.
challenging you
But I
all the
guess,
time.
yeah,
And um,
helping you grow.
they
Yeah,
definitely do. They teach you so much about patience. They make you
indeed.
reflect on, even the things that make you cross or angry. You then have to step back and be like, well, why did this thing make me cross? And part of it is about, again, you have to reflect on yourself. Children do. They make you realize how impatient you are, how angry you can be. Um, they really make you confront aspects of your personality that perhaps you wouldn't have to confront so often, but they do. They really do hold up a mirror.
Yeah,
And so, I've heard lots of people say like teaching is one of the best things you could do, um, because you learn so much by teaching in whatever capacity it is. But I think teaching is just one of those things that when I've met ex-teachers, people who have literally changed professions and are no longer teachers, they still say about teaching that, once a teacher, always a teacher. In some
yeah,
capacity, it shows up. And there is nothing that has this like gut-wrenching thing about teaching, and it's just the way it is. You do things that are pretty ridiculous, and the only reason you do it is because you're a teacher.
Like what?
Coming to work at 7 a.m. or like you do things that yeah. So
It is what it is.
it is what it is. It definitely is what it is.
Okay, last question before I let you
Okay.
go. I'm mindful of time, subhanAllah. Anyone who's still with us now, thank you so much for sticking with us. I hope you are enjoying the conversation as much as I'm enjoying it, inshallah. So Jeba, who would you like to see on this podcast as a guest? And what question would you like to ask her?
One person that I would really like to see on your podcast, Sofia, is Wajiha Amin. So I'm nominating her. So I hope she comes on your podcast in the future one day.
Inshallah.
She's a relationship coach, but she really does talk a lot about she talks a lot about her whole thing is around relational development. So thinking about all, not just the relationships that you have in your life, but with like existing members of your family, you can apply what she's teaching in so many different aspects. And we often underestimate the value that people have to our lives. And so one thing I really liked about her that she taught me is, always leave someone better off having met you. So when you think
SubhanAllah.
about your interactions with other people, whether it's your siblings, whether it's your children, whether it's your colleagues, whether it's your spouse, like whoever, try and leave that interaction, that person being uplifted, so they are better off having had that interaction with you. And practically, it's really hard to do, but it's just something to think about. So the question I would like to ask her is, I'm just really curious to know more about her own story. So I hope if she comes on your podcast, she speaks more about herself, because she does so much amazing work and it's so beneficial to lots of women. But I would be really curious to hear about her story.
Thank you so much, Jeba. It's been really amazing to have you, and what you've just said about asking ourselves, have we left the person we have had an interaction with, have we left them with some kind of, positive feeling?
Mm.
Are they more uplifted? And I really think this also comes under the umbrella of ihsan.
Mm-hmm.
So being mindful of how we make other people feel when they interact with us.
One really good book that I would recommend that everyone reads, because it's had a really profound impact on me,
Mhm.
is Seven Habits of Highly Effective Families by Steve Covey.
Mhm.
I think that book really changed my view on a lot of things, including like my job as well. And in the book, there's a chapter where he talks about this thing called the emotional bank account. And he says that we do things, we all have an emotional bank account, and things happen throughout our day where we add in deposits and then withdrawals. So in interaction with someone, either adds to the emotional bank account or withdraws. And sometimes when you if we were to keep a log of our interactions with a specific person in our family, and then you had to reflect how many of those interactions were positive, i.e., I was making a deposit, and how many of them were negative. And often when we struggle with someone that I'm even thinking of like really difficult students. And I've just taken this concept and I've just applied it. I've also applied it to like family members as well, where you just focus on making deposits and just making a deposit, every interaction, making a deposit, making a deposit. Doesn't matter how they respond, just continue to make a deposit. And then eventually you will see there will be a tipping point where things will change. And so that's a book I highly recommend everyone reads, because it's an
Amazing.
amazing book.
On
Everyone's
top
heard
of,
of his main book, which is Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, but
yeah,
I've not heard of his book around, it's an old book, but I think it's got a lot of wisdom in it.
amazing. On top of everything that you have shared with us, a book recommendation, subhanallah. Jazakallah khairan. How can people find out more about your work? So do you have a website for
So we don't
Empower Your
have a
Exam
proper
Team?
we haven't got a proper website yet, but inshallah we will have one soon. We are on Instagram. So our handle is at Empower Your Exam Team. So you can follow us on Instagram, and then I'm on LinkedIn as well. So
You're on Facebook as well.
we are on Facebook. Yeah, our Facebook. Yeah, you can follow us on Facebook too. I forgot about that. But yeah, we have a Facebook page as well. So you
Okay,
can follow us there.
I'll put the links in the episode description. So thank you so much again for making the time. It was lovely speaking with you again. Jazakallah khairan. Again, I hope that the people who were here at the beginning of the interview are still here now. So thank you so much for sticking with us. Please like the episode, share with your friends, family, comment, put 5 stars on on the podcast. Showing support is so important. Yeah, it can go a long way, and obviously keeps us going, inshallah, and may Allah reward you. And yeah, I hope you just enjoy the conversations and you find them insightful, inshallah. So let us know in the comments whether you are listening from Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. And don't forget to share. Do you have a last word for us?
Jazakallah khair for having me. And this podcast, I am so happy that this podcast is happening, and I'm so excited to see where it goes, because I remember when this was just an idea, and I'm so proud of Sofia for making just an idea, a concept. One day I would like to do this, and now today it's happening and it's growing and it's doing so well. So yeah, I'm just really, really pleased and honored to have been on this podcast episode.
Jazakallah khairan. The honor is all mine, alhamdulillah. Jazakallah khairan. Thank you again for sharing all of these gems. And inshallah, may it be beneficial for people listening, but also for us, inshallah, in the akhirah. So thanks again. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.